Hey y'all, this is Byron. Just want to put something out there. Yes, I am a mental health therapist, and yes, my couch is quite comfortable. However, if you're listening to this podcast, it is not a substitute for a therapeutic relationship with a certified or licensed mental health therapist. So, though I appreciate you taking the time out to listening to me and hopefully gain some information and insight about what's going on with you from listening to this podcast, take the time to seek out mental health resources in your area if you so need to. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoy.
Just give your company, don't act impatiently. You'll get where you need to be in due time. Even when things are slow, hold on and don't let go. I'll give you what I owe in due time.
Check it. When that nigga be thinking of cruising, a raise cap it to the side. Thinking the police gon' pull me over with this herb off in my ride. So I had to brick of weed under the armrest, under the leather. And thinking of starting the ways to make my life a little bit better than the dope peddler.
Ladies and gentlemen, and people of genders that are somewhere in between, welcome back to the Captain's Couch. I'm your host, Byron Taylor. Thank you all so much for continuing to give this thing a chance and gas me up to continue to do this. Shout out to everyone who has listened. We had some interesting developments this week that you saw on Facebook because I was very overwhelmed by the news. We are now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for those folks who like to get their music and podcasts in one particular place. You can go search for the Captain's Couch in the podcast sections on Spotify. If you are an Apple user and you say horribly mean things to people like me who use Android phones, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, which is the purple little microphone button thingy on your iPhone, and search for the Captain's Couch. If you are on iTunes, you can leave a 5-star review. As a disciple of the Black Guy with Tips and a member of House Jackson, the North remembers. I will more than likely, starting this episode, which I actually already have pulled up, will be reading off the 5-star reviews, so long as they're nice, because I like positive feedback and positive reinforcement to keep doing this. So I actually already have a couple of 5-star reviews since we made it to iTunes the other day. A 5-star review from Lil Brother 1914. I wonder who that might could be. Entitled Liddy. You got 5 stars. Not because you're my older brother, but because this podcast is reeking with knowledge and insight that needs to be heard amongst the masses. That's my little brother, people. Shout out. Thanks, EJ, for the 5-star review. I also got a 5-star review from Stormy Weather 322. Interesting name. Entitled Wonderful. That says, I love listening to Byron give a voice to therapy from a black male perspective. He does a wonderful job normalizing therapy, something that is much needed in the black community, especially for men. Well, the person who wrote this 5-star review entitled it Wonderful, and I believe this person is absolutely wonderful as well. I think that you are beautiful inside and out, that you are smart, funny, and you have impeccable taste in words. So thank you so much for the 5-star review. Lastly, we have a 5-star review entitled, because clearly I'm going to give myself 5 stars from myself. I'm happy that I did this podcast. 5 stars. Of course. Because I am that much of a troll that I would give myself 5 stars. You darn right I would. So, thank you so much for coming back to the Captain's Couch. Last week, I gave some kind of raw and vital statistics about why I felt it pertinent and important for black people to become more engaged in mental health, especially for black men, as we look at socioeconomic and historical factors such as racism and discrimination, housing discrimination, um, income disparity, all these things that have contributed to poor mental health in African Americans. So I felt it pertinent that these are reasons why we need to address what's going on with us as far as therapy goes. And of course, we looked at other things such as, as poverty continues nowadays and brings forth new crime and all of these things that leads to all types of different psychological trauma and criminality and all of these things, that it is a good idea for black people, especially black men, to work to address these issues in therapy. So this week, we are going to kind of, guess what, guys? So after last week, maybe you thought about it, maybe you pondered it a little bit. So you know what? I want to go to therapy. Cool, great. So this week, we want to begin the discussion about what you should expect when you first start going to therapy. But first, I would like to give you a few words from a very important man on your journey.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else. The afterworld. A world of never-ending happiness. You can always see the sun, day or night. So when you call up that shrink in Beverly Hills, you know the one. Doctor, everything will be alright. Instead of asking how much of your time is left, ask him how much of your mind, baby. 'Cause in this life, things are much harder than in the afterworld. This life, you're on your own.
Oh, it was 1984. So Prince didn't exactly paint a great picture about therapists by calling them shrinks. But, hey, it was 1984. I mean, he also didn't accurately depict what 1999 would look like when he wrote that song in 1982. But, hey, he's still Prince. Still love the man. So, no, you're not alone. And we have often, as a society, stigmatized therapy and mental illness, and kind of shun those people who battle mental illnesses to feel like a sense of loneliness or a sense of I am alone in this world and I have things that nobody else deals with. But that is not true at all. Like we talked about last week, mental illness is quite prevalent, especially in the African American community, and it's quite prevalent amongst African American men. So this week, I want to talk about what you should expect when you start going to therapy. So, from my perspective as a mental health professional and working with my children, so this is kind of the process that happens with MyPact. So, it's a little bit different than just your traditional track, and we'll talk about for adults kind of the idea of what you want to do as far as looking for a therapist, and then the initial kind of process of your first session and what to expect in your first session. So with MyPact, this is kind of how it goes. The kids will typically have some kind of presenting problems and behavior issues or mental health issues, depending upon what the problem is. That can range from, especially with children, that can range from anything from adjustment disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, severe anxiety, abuse, trauma, neglect, to attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or oppositional defiant disorder. And then a few kind of in between diagnoses, like I mentioned, adjustment disorder, which is depression light in a way, or DMDD, which is dysregulative mood. Wait, hang on, let me look it up. I always get that one wrong because I usually just type that one out, so I don't ever see the whole one that often of that one. Disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. That's what it is. It is bipolar disorder light, where we kind of notice that the kids' moods are like go back and forth from irritable to, aggressive to hyper to sad. We notice those kind of patterns, but we're not quite ready to give a bipolar diagnosis because we're not seeing like we're not seeing manic phases yet in the kids, so we're more likely to diagnose them as DMDD, and over time rule out bipolar disorder. So we'll see the kids having some kind of presenting problems, and they'll be referred to my program by either the outpatient provider who has been following the kid for some time, and outpatient is not doing enough or not providing enough supports or enough kind of resources in order to see the kids make progress, or they're an outpatient and their progress starts to regress and the kids are acting out even more. So they're needing a higher level of care. Possibly they've gone to the acute hospital due to severe dangerous behavior or suicidal ideations or homicidal ideations in some cases, and will require a higher level of care, which my pack provides because, like I said in the first episode, we give mental health resources such as therapy in the children's home and at school, so that they are being seen more often than they would be seen at outpatient. So we'll get the referrals and we'll get medical records, set up a date for admission. So admit day comes. Now, I tend to not read the medical records of my kids until really after I admit them, because I kind of want to meet the kid and kind of have a fresh perspective of who they are as a person before I start to really look at them as, okay, these are the certain things that is going on with this kid, and these are the things I want to focus on. I want to hear it from their perspective, and then their medical records provide me a source of validation and a source of clarification for what's going on with them. So we'll go in admit day, and I have a few different assessments that I have to start doing with the kid to start off. So for me, working with my children, my first 2 times, maybe even 3 times meeting my kids, we don't do a lot of quote unquote psychotherapy work. They're mainly information gathering. So the first session I'll come in, we'll do an intake as far as like things that help the kids calm down, that they enjoy doing, like they're fun activities. And this is where I start to build rapport and a relationship with these kids. So you'll see the title of this episode. This is where I start to build the trust tree with my kids. Shout out to Michael Smith and Jamel Hill, the OG His or Hers podcast. The trust tree was definitely something that I thought was hilarious the first time I heard Mike mention the trust tree, and he would just say some crazy off the wall nonsense that he probably shouldn't have said out loud. Probably about, him having sex with his wife or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, the trust tree ended up becoming a theme with His and Hers with Mike and Jamel, where they have tell embarrassing stories to each other, and kind of at a place of, all right, look, I'm gonna say this, but I don't need you not to clown me. So think of therapy in that way, that we in the trust tree when it comes to therapy. You are building a relationship we're going to build a relationship with these kids. And it's a very delicate balance for me where I'm kind of playing the role of a therapist as well as maybe a de facto parent or de facto role model for these kids or mentor. I have to always remind them that though I am very friendly, though we will engage in friendly activities, we may play video games, we may play board games, we're going to have a lot of discussions. You'll get to know me a little bit more because I like to use self-disclosure a good bit as far as therapy goes, especially with the kids, because it helps them connect and see me as more than just, oh, he's just this adult who is trying to tell me about how bad I am or how my life is not that bad. I offer a little bit of self-disclosure, not full self-disclosure, but some to help them kind of build the connection and relate and understand that, I've had my struggles as well at times, and you're not alone at this. You can get better. It's just going to take effort, and it may take time, because it took time for me. So we'll go in on at midday, and we'll start with intake assessments and learning what they are into. And this is oftentimes when the kids find out that I play video games. So they'll ask me about what games I'll play. And of course they'll be like, do you play Fortnite? And I'll look at them. No, I play real shooters. I play Destiny. I'll get that information from them. We'll get information as far as like their nutrition, make sure that there's no like eating disorders or anything like that, or history of like, neglect, which the kids have started before, which I've actually had a few different situations, a few different kids that I've had to have talks to and discuss with about eating habits because they were dealing with anxiety over going hungry. We'll, make a safety plan, and I will assess their risk of suicide, and we'll write out a preliminary action plan to basically, these are the things that we kind of want to work on to start therapy. But we're going to build a bigger plan later and more in depth in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be my first visit when I, admit the kids. Second visit, I'll get more background information on them as far as, how they function throughout the day, how they're doing in school, what behavior issues they may have, what mood issues they may have, what things make them upset, how they handle their anger. And then lastly, the last assessment that I typically will do is their trauma checklist. And this is where I get a lot of my information from about what to work on with my kids. It addresses questions such as, physical violence in the home, being physically abused yourself, sexually abused, verbally abused, hearing arguments, seeing fighting, drug use. Was there drug use in the home, or have you used drugs? What else? Exploitation. Anybody ever made you, engage in sexual acts for money? Anybody ever touched you inappropriately? All of these things. So I get a good meat of my information from those assessments. And then I'll always ask my kids directly, exactly what is it that you want to work on in therapy? Whether that's I want to work on my anger, or I want to work on being good. And my goodness gracious, I can't tell you how many times I've heard these kids say that. It's like, oh, I want to learn how to be good. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, you're saying that, but I don't think you know what that actually means. So that's one of those things where I have to kind of break down exactly what that means and what that entails. And part of that being learning to be more accountable, how to follow rules, how to actually talk to your parents, how to listen to your parents, how to listen to your teachers, how to be more mindful of what you're doing, put some thought and effort into the things that you're doing. All of these things, go into quote unquote being good. But, for a kid and for a lot of my younger kids, that's all they know what it means is to quote unquote learn how to be good. So I tend to like to go at the pace of my kids. Um, One thing that in one of the articles that I'm gonna go through today, that it talks about is this is a relationship, so it's a two-way street. You know, I can drive fast and leave my kids in the dust, and I may not get very far with them, or I can kind of nudge them slightly and go at a more comfortable, smoother pace with them as long as they're keeping up and be able to, maintain the relationship and build forward. I've had issues with some of my kids where I might have pushed too hard or too far and they, didn't respond very well. I've had situations where I've pushed them just enough and it was the nudge that they need to kind of progress forward. So it's always a kid by kid basis, and is the relationship is always kind of the key when it comes to making progress and making headway based upon how much the kids can tolerate. And I always try to be mindful of their feelings and their ability to understand what I'm trying to break down to them, trying to discuss with them. And in time, at the end of the day, what I want for them to accomplish as far as therapy goes and what they want to accomplish. Part of my job is to keep them accountable to the idea of, okay, this is what you said you wanted to work on in therapy. You need to actually work. You're not putting forth effort. And the one thing that I always have to remind my kids is this very simple fact is the hard work comes from you. I work hard and I do like to talk and I have all these notes that I have to type, but at the end of the day, the hard work and the change that comes about in your life comes from you, not me. I'm just the push. I'm just the nudge to push you in that right direction towards that change. I am not the change itself. You are. So that's one thing I constantly try to remind my kids is that you are the one who will be affecting these changes and making them, whether that's in your relationship with your parents or same thing with the parents, whether it's, better using time out or rewards better, not bribing your kids or not yelling at your kids or not spanking your kids all the time and wondering why your kids got problems or got issues or becoming more anxious, and trying to change your approach to, disciplining your children. Those changes come from you. I just give you the ideas. I just plant the ideas in your mind, or just comfortably lay them on the table. Just, you might want to use this later on. Just gonna sit this right here, and I'm just gonna walk away. You're welcome. At the end of the day, you'll be the person who will make those changes and who will put those ideas into effect in your life. So that's kind of an idea of my expectations and kind of what I prepare my kids for as far as therapy goes. So, hey, they're adult person who may be listening to this podcast, especially adult male, black guy, that guy, right. Hey, you're listening to this and you're wondering, okay, well, I'm not a kid and you're probably not going to be the person who's going to talk to me in therapy because you work with kids. What should I expect when I go to therapy? Well, that's interesting. I'm glad that you asked. I have articles for that. All right. First article from the Huffington Post. Going to therapy for the first time. Here's what to expect. By Amanda L. Chan. This was written in 2014. So, the word counseling or therapy. Now, it is a very semantic kind of thing, right? The words are interchangeable, psychotherapy, therapy, counseling. They are very interchangeable words, and depending upon the therapist or the clinician's licensure or certification, the word will be a little bit different, I guess. But okay, fellas. So when you think about therapy, don't think about Sigmund Freud. I'm not gonna ask you about how you wanted to have sex made you lust for your mother. That is crazy stuff. Don't think about therapy as you're just laying on the couch and I'm just like, while you're just talking. No, don't think about it that way. I do have a couch and it is comfortable. Now, if I did actually practice on my own and not work in people's homes, I'd probably have a nice little office set up. I'd have a couch and like a chair for me to sit in. And we would just kind of talk, one-on-one. Maybe I had like board games and stuff like that. And of course, I work with kids, so board games and those kind of things are good icebreakers for kids to help bring down their defenses and stuff like that. But, if I were working with if I was working with another black man, I would try to get to know him a little bit, like, where you from, what kind of sport, are you into sports, what kind of sports, who's your favorite team, kind of music you listen to, because these are questions I actually ask my kids too, because they're always, like, especially when I know the kids play sports or watch sports, I could always use that as a good teaching tool to kind of relate things back to therapy, especially stuff like accountability. I would like to, get to know you a bit more as a person before I start to kind of break down what it is exactly that brought you to therapy. So the article, I'm going to be often quoting Miss Janine Bertoli, who is a relationship expert and counselor, in this article. The way, let's see, therapy is portrayed in movies and television. The way that it is portrayed in movies and television can paint a no way, that's not for me picture. But in reality, there is often a comfy couch or a chair, and your therapists are not detached, distracted listeners who charge you an arm and leg for an hour of their time. No, I very much try not to be a detached listener. I'm actively engaging with my kids whenever I'm talking with them. I very much am actively listening, and I do write notes. Typically on my iPad, I write notes about things that they say. Sometimes so I can reverberate it back to them so that they know that, one, that they know that I'm listening, and two, I can kind of flip what they're saying so that they kind of have a better way of looking at it. But also, it helps me when I'm writing my notes later on that I'm giving my kids a voice in my notes, that they are speaking to their experiences, and I am reflecting that when I'm writing. One of the number one things that is like constantly drilled into people when it comes to therapy is that people think I have to be in crisis or the intensity of the issue has to be so bad to go to therapy. That's not true. And I can speak to my own experience when it came to therapy, is that I didn't go immediately after my ex-wife and I separated. I went several months later because I just wanted to have a good idea of, am I ready to try to start dating? What do I need to work on? What do I need to look for, in order to be more successful at dating? And I'm very happy I did. My the therapist I saw actually had me write down a list of qualities that I wanted in a partner. And I think I did a really good job at finding someone who had those qualities. So we'll see. Now, of course, one of the points that often drive people away from therapy is the cost. And yes, it can be cost inhibitive. well, no, cost prohibitive. Yeah, prohibitive. That it can price people out, and I'll do an episode one day about pricing like options as far as therapy goes that may be more affordable for people. Whether that be employee assistant programs or community mental health, stuff like that. That'll be an episode that I'll talk about in the coming weeks. But I like Dr. Bertoli's perspective on this when she said this, and like it's like any kind of medical care, and I think seeing as I had a bunch of dental work this year, it definitely rings true. Therapy is expensive, but it is an investment, and you should be getting a return on your investment. There are other things that are expensive that we do not question the finances of so much, such as hiring a good divorce attorney or a good quality dentist who can, save a tooth and get a nice crown put on it. Things like record players or, records or video games. We don't necessarily think about the finances of some of the hobbies that we enjoy, but then for some people, the cost of therapy is a hang up that will stop them from going. So therapists are not just people who listen to their problems. That's one of the expectations I often tell my kids is, I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm not here to fix your problems. I do listen to them. And like, as I told one of my kids the other day, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to open up and talk to me. It's good that you're finally allowing yourself the opportunity to kind of let go of all of these things that you've been holding on to from, your relationship with your biological mother and, all of these things all these experiences that you've had that you've been running away from all these years. It's good that you're finally letting them go and getting them out. But my question to you is, what happens when I'm gone? When therapy's over with and you have to talk to your parents, then what happens? You can't just refuse and not want to talk to them. All right, so you want to give therapy a shot, right? So, first things first, find a therapist. So, the purpose of this podcast is kind of geared towards black men and black mental health. Resources like Therapy for Black Girls. There's also a website for Therapy for Black Men who have directories of therapists in your area that you can search for, therapists that are all over the country that are constantly joining that directory in order to, seek out black clients who are wanting help, who, and for black therapists and black licensed social workers, we absolutely love doing this work because we want to provide a space of healing for our people. This isn't more than, and I tell my kids this all the time, is I take particular pride in working with my young black kids. And, because you all will be black men like me in the long run. And that I want to provide you all with an opportunity to learn how to grow more healthy than the environments that you find yourself in. And I want to be a good influence on you as you grow older so that when you become my age, you are more healthy, fulfilled individuals, that you're not just constant walking balls of anger that are willing and ready to explode on the first person that come across or mistreat the women that come into your lives that want to love you. So yeah, there are, of course, Google is always your friend if you're looking for a specific issue that you want to address, whether I did take a look at Therapy for Black Men, Therapy for Black Men's website. I may link that in the show description, as well as probably Therapy for Black Girls. The podcast for one, and for two, I believe she has a directory as well for black female therapists. I believe it's going to be mostly female therapists. I think there are some black male therapists in Therapy for Black Girls, but pretty certain most of them, like probably 90% of them, will be women, black women. The Therapy for Black Boys, Black Men's site, I did notice that there was a combination of men and women who were on the directory to provide service for men, and that's not a bad idea at all. That black women also provide service, and it's not even a bad idea the other way, for black men to provide services for women. I've had a few different female clients in my time that I've done considerable amount of work with, especially my young black girl who I just discharged, and like I talked about last week, I'm very proud of. We did a lot of work as far as like sexual trauma and helping her heal from that. That I was very proud of, that we were able to work together on, to be able to confront what she had been struggling with. So how do I find who's my best fit? So Dr. Bertoli suggests that you make a list of at least 3 to 5 potential therapists, depending upon where you get them from. Then contact them. Ask them the same 3 to 5 questions. They can be specific to whatever your issue is, as far like it could be, am I struggling with my weight loss? I'm struggling with my anger, or, my relationship. And it could be something as simple as, it could be something really broad, like, what's your take on Black Lives Matter? Or, what's your take on how my childhood may have affected my relationships right now with my girlfriend, and how I'm treating her, and how she's, responding to me saying that I'm kind of toxic. Depending upon the kind of rapport that you get with the therapist and the kind of information and feedback you get from them, kind of may narrow it down. Narrow down exactly who your choice is going to be. So when you find a therapist, they're more than likely going to do a much shorter version of what I do. They'll probably do a 10 to 15 minute consult over the phone with you before your session. Now, they may also have you fill out some paperwork. If you do choose that therapist, they'll probably have some paperwork that you'll sign, and kind of break down what your presenting problems are or whatever your issues are. If you've been in therapy before and you're trying a new therapist, they'll ask for your consent form and sign you over for your medical records, so they know exactly where you've made progress and what you need to continue to work on as far as therapy goes. All right. So, you chose a therapist, guys. Good job. Points for you all. I'm very proud of you. I'm not saying that facetiously. I am extremely proud of you. If you've made the leap to seek out mental health treatment, I'm extremely proud of you. Keep going, right? So your first session is just going to be a regular therapy session. Your therapist is going to try to get a feel for you. You're going to try to get a feel for your therapist, right? So Dr. Bertoli says that some therapists do a first session by getting an assessment of the current problem. Some will do background, so they'll understand your childhood and any medical issues. Some will just listen and say, a lot. And will be a more passive therapist. Some will engage with you about what's going on with you right now and get more in depth to it. When you go, you'll get the default, unless you prepare. And by prepare means that you show up to therapy with something that's specifically in mind that you want to get out of therapy. Yes, Bertoli says, prepare, quote unquote, means come in with an idea of what you want to get out of therapy. So if that thing that you want to get out of therapy is, I want to not be so angry, or I want to heal from this thing I've been holding in for all these years that I never talked about, then bring it to the table and we'll get it started. And that's exactly what we'll talk about. If it's more broad, I'm not exactly a passive therapist because I know I talk a lot as a person. I'm still a very good listener, but I do talk and I do interact a lot with my kids. I definitely did have a session yesterday where I had to be I had to be more of a passive role in the conversation because the kid just kept going and going and going and going. But what he was saying was important and he needed to get it out. And I was able to kind of knock it back at him and, kind of flip it back on him. It's like, hey, why can't these things be true? What's so wrong about having depression? What's so wrong about having ADHD? At the end of the day, can you overcome these things? The answer is yes. So, I try to not play a more passive role, but sometimes you have to as a therapist. But I'm definitely not the with the pad just writing therapist. I am more of the actively engaging type of therapist and talking type of therapist with my kids and with the parents. I mean, I think I am a little bit more passive with the parents, largely because I think a lot of the parents that I work with don't have the expectation that they also can affect change in their kid and not just what I'm doing. Things that they're doing also can affect change in the kids. So you get in therapy. Here's 6 things to expect, right? This is from Psychology Today. One thing people don't really understand or fail to kind of grasp the idea of is that going to therapy disrupts not only their inner world, but their outer world as well. And when we say disrupt, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. You will possibly see changes in your relationships and your job and your friendships as you're working through therapy. There's no way to really truly prepare yourself for what's going to come out and what's to come through the course of therapy work that you do. You may regress in like your work, or you may be more inclined to stay at home because you're kind of working through unpackaging a lot of things that you haven't thought about or expressed out loud through therapy as you're going through your everyday life, that you're still going to have some time it's going to take you to get through it. So that's something to bear in mind. Everybody's journey in therapy is different. Some people's are shorter, some people's are longer, especially depending upon, severity. If your illnesses, if your mental health, issues are more chronic, you're going to spend a lot of time in therapy as far as maintenance work. If what you experience is more acute, you'll spend a 3 to 5, maybe 8, 10 at the most sessions and probably be done. It just depends. Everybody's journey is going to look different. So first thing that you may experience with therapy is you may see more and deeper than you used to. So when you start therapy, you may talk about and open up about your fears, your anxieties, but this also can open the space for you to dig into your life and discover what has shaped you to become the person you are today. So if you and your therapist have a strong bond, it's possible you might end up in a long-term therapeutic relationship. And the longer you go, the more you'll be able to exercise your quote-unquote seeing beyond muscle, a skill that comes in handy after therapy's over with. The thing that I always stress to my kids is you got to use these skills long after I'm gone. Number two, you might find yourself lost in your thoughts more frequently than before. Hell, I think even as a therapist, I'm guilty of this. It's not uncommon for you to be more reflective, or introspective into your life or what's going on around you. Your therapist is constantly throwing open-ended questions at you, and it's likely going to spark your self-curiosity and your self-awareness. So think about the things that you're saying. And the funny thing is, like, I said this to this kid yesterday, and he didn't quite get it, but I just kind of laid it out there and planted the seed out there when he was talking about his life and his experiences, and he was like, why me? Why did I have to go all through all this? What I ever do to deserve this? And I basically was like, well, why not you? You know, what makes your life so unique and so special that you should be immune from these things? Because you're not the only person who has had to go through these things, you know, and a lot of these people have been able to overcome them. And I think I'm probably going to go back and talk to him more about that next week when I see him, because I didn't quite do a great job of explaining the why not initially, but I think in time I was able to kind of parse it out to him. But I think I'm going to go back and talk to him about it a little bit more. I've seen this one here. Number 3, people may resist the new version of you. You may even resist the new version of yourself as you're working through therapy. I've definitely noticed that with one of my kids. He, I think, is purposely sabotaging his progress in therapy because he doesn't want to have to change. You know, he's at a phase in life where he's not quite gonna be a kid anymore, and he doesn't realize that he has to work to go through that growing change. And yeah, it is difficult, but he is very much like sabotaging his progress because he doesn't want to have to. Sometimes many people don't expect when starting therapy how much their relationships with other people are going to change. So think about it this way. You've spent much of your life, quote unquote, fitting in certain relationship puzzles by behaving, thinking, and feeling in a predetermined way. But when someone starts therapy, all these behavior patterns get challenged. You'll grow, you'll change, you'll transform. I know this is affected me as I've progressed forward in the past 2 years, that my relationship and how I fit in my life from before, especially with my ex-wife, has definitely changed, especially now because I'm in a new relationship and I'm much happier, and I'm trying to set more concrete boundaries that didn't exist probably when my ex-wife and I were married. Definitely has been a challenge for her, and it's been a challenge for me. So though it might feel like a letdown, it may feel disheartening, it is important to be aware of it so that you have the patience. So you have patience with other people so that they can learn to adapt to the new version of you. However, it is not your responsibility to adapt, to make others adapt to you. That's something that they have to work on. You may identify toxic and harmful patterns much more easily than before. I know that helped me out as far as preparing for dating, is having a better idea of what I wanted to be, what I wanted to deal with, and what I would tolerate in relationships. So it's no surprise that the way someone reacts and behave with others is largely because of family patterns or learned behaviors. Some of those behaviors may be healthy or unhealthy depending upon how they kind of fit with other people. So when you go to therapy, you're likely to start to identify unhealthy, toxic, or harmful patterns from your generational lineage and past experiences. When you call them by name, and this is one of those things, fellas, that I say the idea of going to therapy is really important for you all. Is that it can help point out harmful and toxic patterns that we have kind of been constantly taught throughout generation after generation after generation, especially the idea that manhood has to be this constant ball of armor that shields us from feeling emotions, or that we're like almost computers in a way, that we are devoid of emotional responses, we're devoid of feelings of grief, of sadness, of loneliness, that we try to stop ourselves from feeling those things, or we project them to women and say that women are emotional creatures, and that, you know, we as men are rational when rationality has no gender. Emotionality has no gender. These are normal things. These are things that people in general are either better or worse at managing or being able to construct. Logic does not have a gender. Logic is merely and simply a concept of a collection of thought processes and philosophical ideals that shape a person's thought processes and perceptions. Everybody has those, you know, but, you know, we see constantly men saying that, you know, women are irrational and that men are the, you know, the more rational species, and that women are emotional. But yet I literally saw this a couple of days ago on Twitter, that some dude who did not know my friend at all jumped in her tweet talking about, oh, well, clearly, you know, you're the irrational one or whatever. Like, you don't know this woman. I know what this woman, I have a very good idea of what this woman has been through. And by and large, she is still probably more psychologically better put together than you are, jumping in her tweet talking about, oh, look how y'all emotional, and see, this is what I'm talking about. You mostly, I was like, dude, like, what are you talking about? Like, how dare you have the idea, you know, the nerve or the gall to come into my friend's. Oh yeah, here it is. I found it. Matter of fact, this dude put on Twitter, and I quote, Midgety Maine. Wow, that is hilarious. Your Twitter handle, sir, Midgety Maine. Why? Why do so many women on here have therapists? What's wrong with therapy? What's wrong with people talking about them being in therapy? To which, shout out to D, at Brains and Buns on Twitter, because we're smarter and more emotionally intelligent than men. And by a lot of metrics, that's very true. Black women are the continuously growing most educated demographic in the United States. So this other dude pops in, Faye the villain. Okay. You mean more emotionally unstable and more prone to lash out at innocence. It states in your it shows in your statement, seek help immediately. This is what we call projection, people. I very much am going to do an episode about toxic masculinity and men lashing out, because we are constantly told and conditioned that women are the emotional species, that women are emotional sex, that men are more rational, and yet and still I keep seeing, and I mean keep seeing, article after article after article, after police report, after police report, after article and article of this man killed this woman because she refused his advances. That's lashing out, people. That is lashing out in the utmost of violent means and destroying women's lives. And yet still, you will have men like Faye the Villain and Midgety Maine, black men, try to tell us how therapy's bad and how black women are more irrational and more prone to lashing out at people. And yet still, most domestic abusers are black. Most violent crimes against women are committed by, that was bad. Most abusers are men. Most violent crimes committed by women are by men. So quit trying to sell this story that women are irrational and they're more emotional. You know, I literally responded like, I'm seeing a whole lot of aggression and projection coming out of this tweet. You took the time to call a woman who you don't even know emotionally unstable. Says a lot about your need to seek treatment. Probably like 10 years ago. Or maybe now. Whichever. Like, I don't have the words. I really don't. This is why I'm doing this podcast. Like, fellas, this is why. This tweet, the string of tweets that I read, this is why I'm doing this. I'm very tired of seeing, and this is conversations that I'm having with my young boys now, that when you get to dating age, you are not entitled to a woman's time. You're not entitled to her attention. You're not entitled to her smile. You're not entitled to anything of her. She is her own person. And if she decides to give you any of those things, enjoy them while you have that opportunity. And when the opportunity is gone, take your behind and move on. I am a man who had to learn the hard way in a myriad of different ways of falling on my face. That I am not entitled to a woman no matter how quote unquote good of a guy I am, or no matter how much I want it. I'm just not. If she's into you and she wants you, cool. It'll happen. If not, leave that woman alone. And God forbid, when you lash out and you get angry, you know, fellas, you hit the, you ain't that fine no way. Well, F you then, girl. Or what's worse, what I keep seeing articles of a woman denying a man his advances and him physically assaulting her or killing her. That's lashing out. And extreme violence and anger because you feel entitled to that woman. That's not true. So maybe, just maybe, you need to go to therapy and work to identify harmful patterns of behavior that you haven't been addressed because you've been taught these things all your life that, you know, we are hunters and women are our prey. Maybe, just maybe, you need to go to therapy and address those things. Number 5, you develop a more fuller emotional vocabulary. Naming your emotions is one of the most basic goals of any therapy process. It doesn't matter what type of psychotherapy you attend or what kind of therapist you have. You will undoubtedly help name your feelings. The more you do this, the more extensive your emotional vocabulary grows. And this is something I have to work on with kids is, you know, working on teaching them more words than like sad or mad or happy, you know, disappointed, frustrated, let down, agitated, annoyed, overjoyed, things like that, you know, kind of broaden those things, to broaden those emotions and feelings that they have so they have a better idea of how to put them into words. And lastly, you might end up with more questions than answers. Therapy isn't going to answer every single question that you had, but it's going to help you gain the tools in order to think more critically and keep in mind that it may take you longer to get those answers. So therapy may just get you to start down the path of figuring out the things that you've been through, or figuring out the feelings that you've had for years upon years that you're trying to like kind of finally work your way through. As you dive into your history and identify what shaped you to become who you are today, you may soon realize that there are many more questions than answers. Some personal hypotheses you might never fully corroborate. It's healthy to ponder your life history has shaped who you've become today. But as you ponder and think critically, it may take you more time. So take your time. Therapy it's not going to be a lifelong thing, but if it can start you on the pathway of working towards building better skills and help you break down those answers along the way, then it's a good start. And it's a good catalyst to propel you forward as you work through your history and work through, the processes that have been damaging for you and that in the long run you want to improve on. So that's what we can learn to expect from therapy. Oh, we hit the 1 hour mark. So yes, let's go ahead and wrap up. So yeah, that's what you can expect for what you are going to start to get out of therapy. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here on the Captain's Couch. I went a little bit longer than I expected it to go, and sorry about that little rant there towards the end, but I think I needed to get that out there. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully next session may be a little bit shorter. We might start delving into some of the illnesses, diagnoses that I'm seeing as working with children. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Captain's Couch. You can find the podcast at the Captain's Couch page on Facebook, at Captain's Couch on Twitter. You can search for the Captain's Couch on Google Podcasts, iTunes, yay, Spotify, woo! A few other places, Stitcher. Stitcher, there are ways to leave 5-star reviews. It is convoluted. I have to figure out how to explain that to y'all. On Apple Podcasts, hit the purple button, search for the Captain's Couch, leave a 5-star review on there. Continue to subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another topic to be determined. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon. Peace.
Congregation, will you turn your text to the book about Cass? Chapter 2, verse 1. The first one that feel me. Jump up and make a joyful noise. Use outcast it. Meaning, now you have a choice like that.